Now, let's get to the conversation. Now, I would like to hear from you all. What are your perceived or known barriers to engaging in the conversation with your parent? Now, feel free to unmute yourself or place it in the chat. What you are seeing as, a barrier to having the conversation with your parent about supporting your sibling.
I can start.
Hello, Steve.
Hi. I think it's just, this is kind of a very generic answer, but in short, I think it's just overwhelming, but also it's kind of hard to, I guess, quantify, because like the conversation, you can't just bang it out in an afternoon. Like there's no way that's happening. You can't be like, all right, let's just grab a sandwich. Just we'll go over a couple of action items and we'll be done, and it's like, it's more of a, I don't know what I don't know. And then also too, so me personally, I'm 30, my parents are in their mid 60s. And also, Walter, just so you know, you can use any of this. Just, you don't have to go back and timestamp this for yourself. My parents are in their mid 60s. So I'd like to think, hopefully, I still have some time before they're either not with me and my sibling or aren't able to help. But that's not an effective way to think. So there's no real, I guess the problem is there's like not like a national talk to your parents. It's not a national the conversation day.
Right.
And,
and you have a very good point, Steve. You're right. There isn't, and it will be an evolving conversation. And one of the things, and I'll talk a little faster because it's getting late, but I think this is the gist of where we want to be in this conversation, that it is a continuous conversation. One of the things that I have done with my children is that we do have meetings. It's not necessarily about future planning, you know what I'm saying? But we're having conversations about different things. It's and you may go from that perspective that you do say, okay, in your head, we're going to talk about, I want to know about this, you know what I'm saying? But you don't want it to seem I'm talking from a parent perspective, and you have to know your family. Melissa, did you want to say something before I proceeded with this? I don't want to leave you out.
The main word that comes to mind is like delicate. I think with my parents, I have to really strategize how I'm going to approach the, concern or whatever. And if I push, or if I don't use the right language, if I push them too far, my mother especially like completely retreats and like shuts down and will refuse to talk about it anymore. So it's like, how do I navigate and create the conversation in such a way that it's not going to push her to that, shut down basically. Yeah. So I feel like it's just very delicate way of communicating.
Are very good words. Overwhelming, delicate. Lisa, it sounds like she's got something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, add fear on top of that. And I think it's fear on both sides. I mean, for me, I thought that my mom will be 72 this Friday. And I thought for 20 plus years or more for me that I was doing everything right. I was allowing her to be able to not have to take time off from work, to be able to go to the IP meetings, to join the different organizations, to get the support, to understand parents, to get my own sibling support. And I am at a pivotal point now where any and everything that I say to talk about the future planning for my brother, it hits a roadblock, and it saddens me because my mom and I always had a great relationship. And for this past 2 or 3 years now, and having the conversations about what that future looks like for my brother, it has gone from 0 to 1,000 with her. And the other thing that I think that keeping in mind is that I took it personally, obviously, because it wasn't the relationship that I've had with my mother. But I also have to realize that my mother is aging. Like, there are things with her that I recognize that her hearing isn't the same. So the way that she's processing things, I think sometimes she feels that she's being attacked. And so I honestly, I struggle with knowing what to do to support everyone at this point. And so I've just had to establish some boundaries for myself now, because I was feeling myself being drained. And the last thing I'll say here is just that I had to realize it came to a point that I can't fix it now and fix it later. So I've had to put this at a pause right now and know that the world that I'm creating for myself will come to a screeching halt at some point, and I don't know what it looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, and you have a very good point about, a screeching halt, because a lot of families have already seen that screeching halt during this pandemic. You know what I'm saying? That all of a sudden, boom, everything's changed. Children are without parents and vice versa, and so what I say to that is that, and I'm going to talk to them, I'm trying to hurry because I know you have to leave at 7, but we do need to make sure that we are communicating. Sometimes you can't just come direct with it. You know what I'm saying? Like Steve alluded to, you know what I'm saying? You just can't come, here it is, let's talk about, that kind of thing. Now, you do have to figure out what is the future planning in your mind? What is your expectation of what future planning is? Are you talking about the financial piece? Are you talking about what happens for my brother every day? Are you see what I'm saying? It depends on what that is. And that's where I go when you're feeling that overwhelmed. You got to pick one or two, you know what I'm saying? And go from that direction. Okay, if we're going to talk about what happens for him every day, part of it is you being an active listener, in the sense of, let's say that you ask, and I'm using a very generic example. You ask, how was his day today? You know what I'm saying? What did he do today? Now, I have to say this, when you all are asking that question about your sibling, you also are observing or asking that question of what's happening with your parent, because you're taking that role over. You see what I'm saying? So if she's getting up at 5:30, I'm just using an example, you know what I'm saying? She's getting up at 5:30, or she has to prepare the meal, I'm just, for him to go to the day program, whatever that is. You're also observing two lives, really, because you're going to step in, whatever you find out what your expectation and commitment is to those roles. And then you're trying to know what his is so that you can support him in that way. So a lot of what I call observation, sometimes it's not that you are asking that direct question. You may observe something and then say, well, Mom, what happens when this, and this? You see what I'm saying? And then you are developing what's happening in this process. You're starting to put the pieces together. Then over time, the hopeful thing is that then you come and say, okay, I have part of the plan, or, a piece of it. Oh, Mom, now look, I seen you do all this. You see what I'm saying? That kind of thing. It's a starting point. You know what I'm saying? It's a way to get there as slow as you can, but at least moving forward, because it is a very delicate conversation. Next slide. No one wants to really talk about, obviously, end of life, or, even, and I need to say this, it is very, the example has definitely been during the pandemic. It doesn't mean that their lives, they have died or passed away. It could be that they're no longer able to support your sibling. That, they may have gotten sick and or experiencing their own disabilities, that they're no longer there. So in that capacity to be able to support your sibling. So Lisa already alluded to it, the fear, the grief, I think I call it emotional paralysis. I think we get so gripped in the fear of thinking about what the future looks like, we don't even attempt to try to plan for it, because we're so gripped in the fear of, oh God, what's going to happen when I'm not here? Where's, my loved one going to go? What are they going to do? But instead of using the proactive, let's do it, it's just in fear. And I want to say this as a parent, we go through this fear and grief our whole time being a parent, the whole time. I mean, it could be, we go through our own triggers, triggers that remind us that, our lives are not what we thought our lives were going to be, and our child's lives and your lives are not the way we thought family was going to be. So parents are going through their own transition, health, their own safety, their time, their time, if they're trying to work, as well as supporting your sibling, time is ticking, growing older, all of these things are happening. And I heard someone say the other day, which I totally agree, I can't necessarily live what they say, have a balanced life. No, what I do is plant my feet in balance and juggle. And so when I juggle, I am juggling what's most important to address today. It's a day by day situation that they're at the same time trying to make sure we make those times in order to plan ahead. And thank you, Melissa. The emotion, yes, that is just kind of frozen, in the moment. And that's why I say when you're having, next slide, these conversations that basically you are building based on what you have been able to get out of, your parent, a plan, and that then you can say, here it is. Because I think sometimes they're obviously not able to say it. And then at least if it's on paper, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe I will tell them a little bit more now. I hope that helps a little bit. But I wanted to also speak to that it is a paradigm shift. We now, and I said youth, but we're thinking of someone that is becoming an adult or is an adult. They now become the decider. Whether, we know there is the situation if they're under a guardianship, but if they're not, they become the decider. And if they are, if your loved one is part of obviously a team that is supporting them, they now become partners, and the caregiver becomes the supporter. So, that whole thing, I know my kids turned 18, it was like they thought it was a switch that turned and they just knew everything and they can make all the decisions with thinking that they didn't need support. But I found out I do need a little support. But my role as a parent changed, that I could give the information, but they had to make the decision. I couldn't say, go do this, this, and this, and no, you can't do that. But I had to give them the tools, the information for them to make the decision. So keep in mind that the parents are going through shifts and transitions as well as you. And it will never change in the sense of going through a transition. As Lisa said, growing older, the health, there's situations there that there is changes going on, and roles are changing. Because guess what? You might not only be a caregiver to your sibling, but in my situation, my parents, both of them, one, my father, we had to obtain guardianship eventually. My mother, we did no power of attorney, but kind of sandwich generation, where you're supporting a child with a disability as well as supporting parents, and knowing how to navigate all of that is quite, and then if you think about, if you have other siblings, I don't know if you all are, I'm the youngest of 6, next slide. I'm the youngest of 6. So it's been quite interesting as I talk about family dynamics, that when you have a family of 6 and you're trying to have conversations about parents and their future and what, they have expectations of, and getting everyone to be on the same page about what we thought dad said and what really was written that dad did, put in writing. And thinking about the dynamics of all of those gears moving, you have the parent in the middle and then the siblings around. And then let's say this is you and the orange, the sibling. You decide you want to have your own family, you're doing your own thing. But at the same time, everything is still evolving around the sibling and the parent that you now are trying to figure out where you fit or you don't fit, because you have a life, you have decisions you have to make. We have to think, we talked about values and culture, and the family traditions. If you've moved out of the home, I know someone's already spoke that they were 30 and those and older, you're out of the home. What happens in the home? You need to know what's happening with your parent and your sibling. I'll full transparency. Now Trinity and I are here, she and I. When my other children come in the home and they do not realize how the program works, now that it's just she and I, the culture of this household has changed. You know what I'm saying? So we don't put things there, we don't leave these doors open. We don't, do all of these things because it's a matter of trying to make sure we support my daughter. So, things change, families change, you all, leave and have your own lives. You come back in having to understand what everyone's role is in each family member. Who's going to, those discussions, if you've got siblings, having that conversation. What are you saying your role is going to be? Are you saying you're going to take a role in supporting the other sibling? And having very challenging conversations, but they are absolutely necessary as much as you can, because you can't really force, next slide, someone else to speak if they desire not to. Another question I have is, do you really know your sibling? Now, we know you all grown up together, and you've had, sibling relationships, but do you really know what their preferences are? Because guess what, when you all were in high school, that the preferences might have been that they did, like to go skating, and then become an adult. No, that's not a preference anymore. What are the dislikes? What are their goals and dreams? What does it look like when they're happy or sad? And these are types of things through asking, observing, what does that look like? Because one of the things I think, they're all important, but I can't say enough about knowing what different emotions and what that looks like. If you have a sibling that doesn't use words or communicate, or maybe they do, and it's just they're not able to find the words that really fit what they are feeling, right? But through observation and asking the parent, what do I do? What happens when they are upset? What is, if you want to call it, that plan? And in the school systems, and not even just in the school, even in adult systems, they call this behavioral plan. Do you even know what that is? Have you given access to what this behavioral plan looks like? So one of those things of the information gathering, that these are questions and things to consider about your sibling. Next slide. Okay, well, I know I'm pushing it. It's getting close to 7.
Listen, Rhonda, I got time. So if you
Okay.
want, and I'm sure a couple other people do, so I'm loving this. So keep going.
Okay, and then you're very welcome. Thank you. And then what about your life? I was in a meeting and they, going through that question about, what did you think about, going through the pandemic? Give one word about what you felt like you've gone through the pandemic. And so I said reflective. Now, everyone said all the other ones, overwhelm, anxiety, all of those. I totally agree to the nth degree. But I was saying reflective in the sense of that I had to really look at what we were going through and reflect, okay, how is this affecting me as a parent? What is really important? Is my health and safety important, which we know it is, but I had to look from a perspective of thinking of future. What I'm doing right now in my life, is it really effective for me? Is it really benefiting me to really enjoy a long life? And I know that's a very kind of intense, deep question, but I had to think that through. And if I really do have goals and dreams, which I do, I need to prioritize them, right? Some kind of way. I need to take some steps, and I apologize, I'm not as swift on the chat, so forgive me, of trying to figure out what my plan is, you know, and how it fits within me supporting Trinity as well. And so I had to really reflect, okay, you know, I also hit a milestone birthday, and I had to think, you know, what am I doing? What is my current status, you know, and where is it that I really want to go? And making those steps. Is it happening tomorrow? No, it's a work in progress. But making those steps. So my other pieces, you know, thinking about, you know, personal relationships, you know, your friendships, and, you know, your employment, and where you live now, and what your goals and dreams are. To honestly look at that and do an assessment and truly say, what are my expectations and commitment to supporting my sibling? And I think it's very important, you know what I'm saying, that you assess it. Assess what that looks like, because if you're committing to something that you're not truly have the buy-in, it is going to affect you as well as that sibling, because most likely if you're not invested in it or committed to it, it's going to show in other ways. And so I really want you all to really think about that. Now, that doesn't mean that, okay, you say, well, I really don't want to do this piece or that piece. But that doesn't mean that we don't do the work to figure out how those areas are filled. You know, if you have other siblings, if there's other family members, if there's people in the community to begin develop the relationships with. You know, I was just speaking to someone that used to support Trinity when she was at another school, and she was talking to me, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh my goodness, I can add her. She volunteered to do a couple. I can add her to the support team. And sometimes it's, you know, it's not family, it's people that care, and keep in mind that word, care about your sibling, not, you know, that is just something that is an obligation, but they really care about your sibling. And that's a whole nother presentation of that. The next slide. As we know, future planning is something we're doing in advance. And that's what you all are wanting to do. You know what I'm saying? Is that you're wanting to, you know, meet with your family, your parents, and have that conversation. And I don't want anyone to think that I don't, we don't need to include the person. I'm just making sure as siblings that you are prepared to have the conversation with the parent, because we know that we have to include the sibling, but I need you all to really think about what is your relationship with your parent? Are you able to really have a conversation? You know, is there some unaddressed, and next slide, emotions that you may have, and that maybe are making the conversation challenging? Let me move on to but I'll go back to that. But here are some major pieces to planning. And there's absolutely, time does not permit, but I wanted to show you all these areas that truly can be in a whole nother presentation series, okay? But I wanted to share some of the major components to future planning. And they all involve areas of, and when I say this, don't forget that yes, we're talking about the sibling, but if we're connected to our sibling, which we are in a family, we're connected to each other, whether we like it or not, we're still a family. But you also have to look at your own lives when you're looking at this future planning. You're also thinking about where you are in this process. I'm loving that there's the discussion going on but I'm not sure exactly how what's being said. So let me know if there's something you want me to comment on, okay? Next slide. Okay, now, okay, the initial steps. Now, I wanted to, I had a conversation with Walt when we first met, and we were talking about several things. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to address everything that I think would be beneficial, but I did want to give you a running start, right? So there is some, personal assessment that needs to happen, of course. But you got to address what are those barriers to the communication. Is it that they are totally, you know what I'm saying? The shutdown is happening, right? Complete shutdown. And ways in which to address that barrier, and I tried to give, the example of, let's do the observation, you know what I'm saying? And yes, I see something about maps and path, yes. And I do have some resources at the end as well to consider specifically about end of life type of planning that I think will be very, very beneficial. But in the midst of that information gathering, I talked about, the barriers, figuring out what are those barriers. And I know every relationship is different. Someone said, sometimes you bring up, I think it was Melissa, she says, I bring it up and, it causes the whole shutdown of the conversation. And I think it's all about the approach of it. Again, maybe it is, Mom, if you're going out today, could you, just jot down what needs to happen, you know what I'm saying, while you're gone. And those who are person-centered thinking trainers or had some of that, we call that like the 2-minute drill, the kind of thing you tell somebody quickly if you have to leave, these important, complete nuggets, of how to care and support for your loved one. And if you could give it in 2 minutes of, what are those most important things that need to happen when I support my sibling. And so that can start with, like I said, what is the day look like? What is the care and support that your sibling, your parents, child in a day or within a week? And the reason why I say within a week, because let's say, okay, we looked at Monday, but we thought about this is what the schedule is on Monday, but guess what? On Saturday and Sunday, they do this and this. And then maybe every other Saturday, this happens. And really understanding what it looks like to support the sibling, as well as, again, what is happening that the parent is doing to support that sibling. What does parent sibling day look? And another person-centered tool. And I'm not, giving you necessarily a piece of paper, but it truly is to chart what is working and what is not working. And I will say this on several areas of this process, but I'm going to say, as we are looking at the initial part, is that when you are communicating with your parent, what does work? When are you able to have a good conversation? It is only when they're having coffee that you've had, not necessarily about future planning. I'm talking about in general. When you're able to have a productive conversation, what does that look like when you've had a productive conversation about something? Is it in the middle of the day? Is it early morning? Maybe they're people that do like things in writing. They don't necessarily want to have a conversation. Maybe it's a letter that's written. Think that through. What works and what does not work? And that's a whole nother subject. I could go on and on and on. Next slide. Okay. Well, first, before I do this, and thank you all for your patience, I want to make sure there's not some more questions, and I'm going to try to quickly go through. You may have been dialoguing amongst each other, but if there were any other questions or anything else I could help with concerning this topic. My sisters want to different. Okay, yes, that was Raquel. I see where you said my sisters want to defer to our parents' wishes, but they don't. So I can speak to this from the perspective of my parents, and some of it was, he said, she said, kind of situation about what my father wanted, and he had a lot of plans we were so thankful for that he did actually do, but there were some areas he did not, which we know that can happen, that he did not plan for us. And we couldn't really, even defer to what documentation was saying, because what it appeared, the steps he made did not mesh with what was written on the paper. You know what I'm saying? So we couldn't defer, you know what I'm saying, to him, because it wasn't making any sense at all. And some of the siblings were under different impressions about what they thought needed to happen, not necessarily about what my dad wanted. And so I can't say it enough about, we literally have a free conference call line that we use to communicate and pray and some more things on. When both of our parents, when my father passed at the end of 2019, and then my mom went into hospice care, and this was all at the beginning of the pandemic, and thankfully she's doing much better today. But we had to have these conference calls in order to keep everybody aware of what was going on, even going through the whole, okay, let's vote on this. It became a real, and that was when things were, there wasn't future planning. We were trying to plan within the moment. And so being able to try to make sure we do not only know what our commitment is, but even having that conversation with your other fellow siblings, you know what I'm saying, about what that is before we even go to the parent. And so hopefully that helps. But having that conversation, not only with the parent, but also with those other siblings. Because hopefully it is a team effort. And sometimes it's not. There are some siblings that are not wanting to make a commitment in that way. And I'm not saying any judgment. I'm just saying, but you do want to know what someone is willing to do or not, so that there is some other way in which to plan for the future. Okay, 3 more. Okay, Steve left. All right, any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna go down to the resources. If you could click down. Oh, let me do this. I'm gonna do the resources, then I'll come back to that thank you letter to the sibling. Can you go down to the resources before we lose anybody else? Okay, if you can go down. I think there should be a resource if you can click down one more slide or two. Okay, there's some resource there, and then the next one. But I had 3. There we go. These are some of some resources. One of the ones you all were talking about, PATH and MAP. There's People Planning Ahead. It's a guide to communicating healthcare end-of-life wishes. That is something that Quality Trust collaborated with Ms. Kingsbury on it. And it is an actual booklet that kind of goes through all these different sections. And so we have done trainings on this particular booklet. And so we can, talk about that for the future. If we want to do something like that, otherwise, we can provide that as a direct resource, which I think is really, really helpful. It might be even something that you can give And maybe it is something that if they fill out these pieces of it, or you go through it and say, okay, this is how we're going to break it apart. And I'm going to figure out how to get some of these questions answered. And that's something that I'm definitely open to supporting anyone to do with their family. All right. And then there was a letter that I wanted to give you all some encouragement from a parent and some appreciation of you as a sibling. And it was inside the newsletter, or really the little magazine for my daughter's, the foundation of Cornelia de Lange syndrome. And it's a letter that says, an open letter to special needs siblings by Lauren Poots. Dear sibling, it's not easy being you, period. I know it feels as if your needs are never met or put first. As your parent, it's gut-wrenching to have to make decisions that are vital to your siblings' health and well-being, but may leave you feeling like you don't matter as much. Sometimes you cry, occasionally you are angry, and sometimes you protest. Yet when all is said and done, you handle it with grace that far exceeds your years. I admire you. I know nothing else in this life other than being a helper. You know, that's all you know is being a helper. It's likely you don't remember a time when you weren't a special needs sibling. Offering to lend a hand just comes second nature to you. While still a child yourself, you know who's new to our home. You know how to operate the feeding pump. You know how to train the nurse. You know the perfect distraction to calm your sibling during a meltdown, and where all the medical emergency supplies are located. This has created a servant's heart in you, which is a beautiful thing to behold. You are special too. Having a sibling with a disability has ingrained in you a bit more patience and kindness than most of your peers possess. Not only are you a wonderful sibling, you're also a fantastic friend, taking up for the underdog and making sure everyone gets a turn are just things you do naturally. Witnessing how loving and inclusive you are when I play with other children is enough to make me burst with pride. I'm in awe of you. Our family life is rarely predictable. 1 minute we are enjoying a family dinner, and the next I could be headed to the hospital with your sibling. You are shuttled off to spend the night at 2 or 3 other friends. When this happens, we all miss each other terribly. You take it in stride because you have no other choice. You display a strength that no child should have to. You amaze me. Oftentimes, I feel unworthy of being your parent, and like I may be failing you. There's simply not enough of me to go around, I'm afraid. However, I see who you are now and who you are becoming, and I could not be prouder. Being your parent is an incredible honor. My darling child, words cannot express just how much you mean to me. I can't imagine a life without you. You are so important and valued. You complete us. Love, your parent. And I just wanted to say that to each one of you from a parent, as if I was speaking for your mother, for your father, to know that you are appreciated. I'm sure somewhere in there in your lifetime, you had experienced some of what that letter is speaking to. But I want you all to still be encouraged, don't give up of trying to make the connection with your parent. Yeah, it may be long and it may be challenging, but I'm very confident that when you are able to get some of this process figured out, you know what I'm saying, beforehand, doing the planning beforehand, because remember, everybody has to do this future planning. It's just not because it's a person with a disability. Someone's planning your life, or you're planning, or your husband or partner, whoever that is, whoever and whatever. But your life has to be also thought of to plan for as well, because your life is just as important as your sibling. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much for enduring the long presentation. I hope there was some useful tips and things that you could take in your journey, and I'll be sure to share those resources with you in the presentation, so that you can, move forward in the directions that you'd like to. I am definitely open to proceeding in some more in-depth topics, what I'm saying? If there's particular areas that you want to focus on, please let me know if it's not me, and